Hey folks, right now we're going to talk about fraction operations, and I don't mean slicing into fractions. Ha ha ha. Good one! Ah, don't you love math jokes? Okay, so you want to put the date on this sheet of paper. You also want to put your name on it. And we're going to be talking about, like I said, fraction operations, but I'm talking about the adding, the subtracting, the multiplying, and the dividing kind. So here's just a little pro tip here. If you want your whole number to be a fraction, just put it over 1. For example, 4 is the same thing as 4 over 1. And sometimes that helps us with our fraction operators or operations. Or if I would say negative 12, that's the same thing as negative 12 over 1. Which, just to let you know, is the same thing as negative out in front, 12 over 1, which is the same thing as 12 over negative 1. Okay, but I digress. Okay, all you need to do is put a 1 underneath that number. 1 is the denominator, and you have yourself a fraction. Woot! When we talk about fractions, we often talk about fractions needing to be in lowest terms. This just means that we have to cancel out common factors. So for example, if I would say 2 over 8, I know both of these are even, so I can divide both by 2, and I would get 1/4. Another one could be 50 over 100. I can divide both by 10, 5 over 10, and I can divide both by 5. So then the lowest terms is 1 over 2. So what I'm saying here is that there are no common multiples in either the numerator or denominator. Here 5 can go both into the numerator and denominator, whereas 1, that's kind of that you kind of know if you have a numerator of 1 that you have lowest terms. But 1 and 2, they do have a common factor, which is 1, but you just divide by 1 and get the same thing. So basically your rule here is if you have a numerator of 1, you know that you're in lowest terms. So when performing operations on fractions, the rules for adding and subtracting of fractions are very similar, and the rules for multiplication and division are very similar, so that we kind of group them together. In adding and subtracting, you have to find this thing called a common denominator. So that is often a bone of contention, which means it's difficult and it gives some people a headache. Arguments break out. I'm just joking. But I'm going to give you 2 foolproof methods that both have their pros and cons. So there are 2 ways to find a common denominator. Just multiply by the opposite denominator. So if I have 1/2 and I say add 1/8, you can just multiply by the opposite denominator. So I can multiply this fraction by 8 over 8, and I can multiply this fraction by 2 over 2 because the denominator here is 2. Now really what I'm doing is I'm multiplying by 1, which is awesome because I can always multiply by 1. But I'm getting it into, I'm getting the denominator so that they can speak the same language. 1/2 and 1/8 don't really have much to say to each other, but if we get them into the 16th, so 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 times 1 is not 8, 2 times 1 is 2, 8 times 2 is 16. Now see we have a conversation that can happen. Because here, 1/2, 1/8, I don't know, they're 1 of something. But wait, what portion of 16 is that? Yes, 8/16 and 2/16. They're speaking the same language. So, note, if you use this method, you will find a common denominator, but not necessarily the lowest common. Okay, so what we'll need to do is we'll need to use our sweet lowest term skills to be able to get the answer in lowest terms. Let's look at the next method. Find the lowest common multiple between the 2 denominators. So I'm just going to remember here. So 1/2 plus 1/8. 1/2 plus 1/8. And what I'm going to do in the margins are on a scrap piece of paper. Probably in the margins is better because then I can see the work that you do. I'm going to write 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. All right, now I kind of got a little squishy there. I'm just going to maybe rewrite that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. And now I'm going to write down the multiples of 8. 8, 16, 24, 32. So we're noticing that we do have common multiples. I have 16 and 16. I have 8 and I have 8, but my lowest common multiple is going to be 8, the one that comes up first. So that means I don't have to do anything to this one. However, to this one, I need to make sure that the denominator is 8, so we know what portion of the numerator. So I have to multiply 2 by 4 to get to 8. So I multiply the numerator by 4 too. So I have here, I have 4 over 8 plus 1 over 8. What's so great about this method is that I know that it's going to be in lowest terms when I start adding. Whereas this one right here, neither one of them are in lowest terms. So my final answer, I'm going to have to divide by 2 for sure. Maybe a little bit, maybe I'll have to do something else. But this one, when I look at it, 4 plus 1 is 5. So I'm going to have 5 eighths. Whereas this one, 8 plus 2, I'm going to have 10 sixteenths, which needs to be in lowest terms. Whereas this one already comes in lowest terms. But I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. Let's go over the rules for adding and subtracting fractions. So if the fractions, the denominators are not alike, you must find the common denominator. Add and subtract the numerators only, so just the top ones, and keep the denominator the same. So example 1. 7/11, I want a Slurpee now, plus 2/11. So with this one, if the denominators are not alike, you must find a common denominator. However, these guys are alike. Woohoo! So add or subtract the numerators only. So 7 plus 2 is 9, and the denominators stay the same. 11. Woot! What about this one? 1/3 plus 1/4. What I want to do here is I want to use my multiply by the opposite denominator trick. So I'm going to multiply this one by 4 over 4. Multiply this one by 3 over 3. So that I get 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Plus this one right here, 3 times 1 is 3. Over 4 times 3 is 12. Woohoo! Common denominator. I have 7 over 12. Done. Example number 3. 1/2 minus 1/6. Okay, so I know that the common denominator needs to happen here. If I multiply this by a 6 and this by a 2, I am going to find a common denominator, which is 12, but there's even a lower common denominator here. If I were to say 2, 4, 6, 3 times 2 is 6. So I don't have to do anything to the second denominator, and it will be common. So 3 times 1 is 3, over 3 times 2 is 6, minus 1 over 6, which is 2/6. Now here's a bit of a conundrum. We've done the whole trying to get the lowest common denominator thing, and we're still stuck with this denominator, or this fraction that's not in lowest terms. 2 goes into itself once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. Done. Done like dinner. On to multiplying fractions. This is the easiest one. Woot woot. So multiply numerators with numerators and denominators with denominators. Get into lowest terms if you need to. So 7 over 11 times 1 over 2. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. 7 times 1 is 7. 11 times 2 is 22. Done. And we know that this is in lowest terms because 7 is a prime number and it doesn't go into 22. A prime number is a number that doesn't have any factors except for 1 in itself. So you can't get like 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. 7 doesn't have any does not have any factors except for 1 in itself. What about this one? 2 over 5 times 1 over 4. All right. 2 times 1 is 2. 5 times 4 is 20. This isn't in lowest terms though because it's 2 over 20. They're both even. Divide both by 2. So 2 divided by 1 is 2 divided by 2 is 1. 20 divided by 2 is 10. 1/10. Now, if some of you can see this, I can actually get this. I can get to 1 over 10 faster because I can say 2 goes into itself 1 time. 2 goes into 4 2 times. So I go 1 times 1 is 1. 5 times 2 is 10. But if that was too quick, don't worry about it. Just get it into this intermediary stage, and then we can get it down into lowest terms. Dividing fractions is almost as easy as multiplying. The only thing we need to do with this one is we need to flip that second fraction. Then what you need to do is multiply across the numerator with the new numerator, the denominator with the new denominator, and then get into lowest terms if you need to. So if I were just to say 1/2 divided by 4/5, I need to flip the second one. So then that becomes 1/2, and we change the operation between them to multiplication times 5 over 4. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 4 is 8. This is in lowest terms. We're happy. So that's example 1. Example number 2. 1/3 divided by 1/6. So what we need to first do is we need to flip the second fraction. So 1/3 times 6 over 1. 1 times 6 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Now this is kind of an easier one. 6 divided by 3 is simply 2. That's it in lowest terms. So there are 4 Math IXLs that I want you to work on. There are mastery checks for all of them. So grade 8 D4, this is for adding. Grade 8 D5, this is for subtracting. Grade 8 D11, which is for multiplication. And grade 8 D14, which is dividing.